All right, immigration class is in session today, and we are talking about how to petition for a spouse. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing you got to do when a spouse is going to petition for a spouse in immigration is obviously be married. So you have to have a marriage certificate, whether that's from your home country or from the United States, got to have a valid marriage certificate. Now, this breaks down into two different things after someone is married. One, the immigrants either came legally into the United States, so they had a visa or they were paroled in, something to that effect. Or two, entered without inspection. So they came without a visa, they just crossed the border, something like that. Okay, they can't prove a legal entry into the United States. Now, let's start with legal entry. Okay, so if the immigrant entered legally into the country, now we're going to look at who is their petitioner. Is their petitioner a United States citizen, or is their petitioner a legal permanent resident? Okay, because they have different effects. Now, if they're married to a United States citizen and came in with a visa or a legal entry, then they are eligible for what they call an adjustment of status. That is a specific type of process in immigration law where someone is adjusting their status here in the United States. So all the paperwork's done here in the United States. If there is an interview, it will be here in the United States. The immigrant, or the beneficiary, as they're called, never has to leave the United States to process for their residency. Okay? However, if they are married to a legal permanent resident, okay, even if they came with a legal entry, they're not going to be able to do an adjustment of status because they are not in what they call the immediate visa category. Okay? They're going to have to wait for a priority date. Now, once a priority date comes, we're going to have to check for unlawful presence. So, were they here without status for some period of time? If so, they might have an immigration bar on their record. You might need to do a waiver for that unlawful presence. Once the waiver is approved, the beneficiary is then going to have to do what's called consular processing. So they're going to have to go back to their home country for their interview. Okay, so they're going to have to take those additional steps. So it's going to be a much longer process if they're married to a resident rather than a citizen, even if they came legally into the United States. Obviously, one way to fix this problem is to have their spouse naturalize and become a U.S. citizen and then do your process. Then you would qualify for the adjustment of status and avoid all of this stuff. Now, the second type of entry that is possible here is entering without inspection. Somebody that comes without a visa, that does not come legally into the United States, or they can't prove they came legally into the United States. They're in a different pathway as well. Okay, so in this scenario, regardless if they're married to a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident, they're going to have to do what's called consular processing. So they're going to have to go back to their home country for their interview. Now, before we get there, we have consular processing, but before we get there, we want to make sure that the immigrant, the beneficiary, does not have unlawful presence. If they do have unlawful presence, then you want to make sure that they qualify for a waiver. They can use their spouse as a qualifying relative, but if they qualify for a waiver, you're going to want to file that before you go to consular processing, okay? Most likely you're going to file a 601A waiver. Okay, that's going to clear up that unlawful presence. They're still here in the United States while they're going through this process, although it does take quite a long time by current processing standards. Once that is approved, then you would work through the National Visa Center to set them up to do consular processing, where they would have to go back to their home country for that interview. See all this? Hope it clears some things up for you. Let me know if you have any questions.